a video on turning the pork meat that we got from the pig's head and turning it into a pork ragu. Pretty straightforward. Per pig's head there's about a kilo of meat. That doesn't include the pork cheeks, which I'm going to turn into guanciale. I think that's how you pronounce it, obviously depending, I don't fully know, but there's about a kilo of meat. So in total there's probably about coming up to 2 kilos of meat per pig's head, depending on the size of the pig's head. So it's all going to be really tasty meat. It's going to be a bit tough, but we're going to cook it for a long time, and it's going to cook slowly, and it'll become absolutely delicious. It's a little bit fatty, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some of these bits of fat off. I'm going to render that down, and that's what I'm going to fry and colour the pork in. So we're utilising its own fat to do that, and then I'm going to cook it like these bits. I'm going to cook it. I'm not going to cut too much fat off. I'm going to let that cook into the ragu, so it'll make it certainly a lot more richer of a dish. And then it'll be a simple case of, once it's all tender, just going through it and shredding the meat, like these nice bits of meat here, away from what fat's left and what kind of skin. So that's kind of what we'll do. I'm going to use my own tomato sauce that I've got. So it's tin tomatoes or passata, and it's got in onion, carrot, celery, garlic and herbs. So I'm just going to use that to cook the pork in. However, if I didn't have that, what I would be using would I'd be using all those same ingredients, but I'd be cooking them down at the same time as we cook the pork. So the basic recipe is 1 medium carrot, half a stick of celery, 1 medium onion, clove of garlic, sprig of thyme for 1 tin per 1 tin of tomatoes. So that's basically what that is, but I don't need, because I've got that, I don't need to add any more vegetables or any more kind of flavouring. So do a little bit of meat prep. I'll fry this off gently, get some of this fat off there, and that's what I'll be frying it off in. Just a little bit of colour, not too much. We're not aiming to cook it all the way through. We're just going to give it a little bit of colour, which will add some flavour to the ragu, and then cook it in a deep pan with a lid on. Because my pasta sauce, tomato sauce is already kind of quite reduced down and thick, it doesn't need to have the lid off, so the moisture evaporates. It can have the lid on, which will it'll be able to cook at, it'll use less fuel because it's cooking with the lid on, and it will cook a little bit quicker as well. So that's it. So we'll come back when I fried everything off, and then you can see what it looks like, and then just be a case of I'll work it, because I can never just kind of quite tell. But I'll be able to then work out how much of the tomato sauce that we need to add for that amount of pork. So there's about 1.8 kilos of pork there. Not pure meat, because there's some fat and some skin and all that type of stuff. But I'll work it all out. And if you don't want to make your own tomato sauce, I'll put in the description as well the ratios of how much meat to how many onions, and how much celery, and how much carrot, and how much tomato, and how much garlic, and how much thyme. So that will kind of make things just a little bit easier. Right, so pork has been browned off, give it a little bit of colour. That's fine. Drained it off from the fat as well. We do like fat in things, not just too much. So what I've done in the frying pan is I've just added a little bit of water just to kind of remove all the caramelized kind of juices off the bottom of the pan. If I wasn't using my own tomato sauce and I was using canned tomatoes and vegetables, what I would do is I'd chop up the vegetables, and then I'd fry them in the pan after I'd fried off the meat, and then I'd be adding the vegetables. Now you won't need to add some water to the pan to get rid of the caramelized meat juices if you'd added the vegetables, to give them a little bit of a cook afterwards, because the water in the vegetables would have removed all that kind of sticky residue, the caramelized bits from the meat from the pan. So that's kind of it's just different ways of doing things. But if you kind of, it's to be honest, to make the, it's going to be a bit of a faff to make the sauce just to then make this. So I would recommend just chopping vegetables and making the sauce, making the ragu that way. So we'll add 1 jar. So these are 600 gram jars of meat. Yeah, not meat, of sauce. So I reckon it's going to need at least 2. So I'll adjust the recipe accordingly. You don't have to add vegetables to your ragu. You can just add a bare minimum tins of tomatoes and garlic. If I'm honest, I don't think you need to go too OTT with things. So what we're going to do after this, we'll add the tomato and then we'll put it on the heat. We'll get it up to boiling point and then we'll turn it right down to a slow simmer, and then it'll be on the stove until it's ready. That might be, depending on the quality of meat, not the quality, but the how tough the meat is, will depend on how long it takes to cook. So that's going to cook down. I don't think that's enough meat, but what we will do, what we'll do is we'll just add a little bit of water to the jars. We'll give them a bit of a shake out, just to get rid of all that, to use up that extra bit of sauce that's stuck in the jars, like that. And then I reckon that's going to be enough sauce to cook the pork in. The pork's going to release a little bit of juice, so that will be fine. And if we need to add a little bit more, we can always add more. As always, as I say, you can always add. It's very difficult to kind of take away. So this will go on the stove, up to temperature, boil it. Just not a rapid boil to get up to temperature. Just like a medium heat, just to kind of gently get it up to like a boiling point, and then we'll turn it right down and cook it as low and slow as we can. Might take 3 hours, might take 5 hours, might take 6 hours. These are kind of quite tough cuts of pork. However, with tougher cuts of meat, you really do get much more flavour, and there's more connective tissue in there that breaks down and makes things certainly taste a lot nicer and richer. So we'll come back when I brought it up to temperature, and then I'll show you what I mean by a slow cook, because I see lots of videos and I see lots of things on TV where people talk about cooking things for 2 hours, like joints of brisket and things, and I always think to myself, there's no way that piece of meat is going to be cooked in 2 hours, and certainly so I want to kind of, and the temperatures that people cook them at, I always think that's a little bit too high. The pan's moving around a little bit too much. So I'll show you what I mean by a slow cook, and it's just a case of we'll be cooking it until it completely falls to bits, and then we can pick through it, we can pick out the meat, any bits of skin we can get rid of those, and then I think what I'll do is I'll put it in some jars and I'll preserve it, and then it's in the cupboard or it's in the fridge for whenever I want to eat it. But I'm waffling as always, so back onto the heat. Right, so this is what I mean by a slow simmer. A few bubbles coming up, no real kind of movement. You can feel the meat. It's still really tough. It's going to be a good 3 or 4 hours at the very least, but there's no rush. Just slowly, back of the stove, smallest gas jet, tiniest amount of heat, the lowest it will go without going out, and then just let it sit, let it cook slowly. All the connective tissue and the gelatin and the fat's going to break down in the meat, and it will release lots of flavour into the sauce. The sauce will penetrate the meat, it'll become lovely and soft, and that's exactly what you want. So just let that sit and slowly cook. No rush at all. You can do it in the oven on a low heat. I don't know, I suppose maybe around 120, something like that, in the oven, in a tray or in a container, a lidded container in the oven, 120, low and slow, all day, and it'll be really nice once it's cooked. Really super tender and delicious. We'll add, while I'm here, this is just a little bit about catering and pans and things like that. So if you've got a tall pan what happens is liquids don't evaporate just as easily in a tall pan. So if you don't want something to dry out and evaporate too much liquid off, you put it in a taller pan. It won't the liquid in it won't evaporate off just as quick. It'll still evaporate off, but it'll take a little bit of time. So it tends by the time it reaches the top of the pan's cooler, and some of the liquid wants to condense, and it forms droplets and then falls back into the pan. You don't find that with shallower pans. Shallower pans tend to make things evaporate off quicker. So that just something that I know, a little bit of information that I feel the need to pass on. The ragu has been cooking for about 6 hours. I've just let the pan cool down a little bit because I'm going to pick through some of the meat, not all of it. You don't need to see me picking through all the meat. We'll just do a few bits, and then you can kind of see what you kind of need to do. Different ways of doing it. You can put a pair of rubber gloves on, and then can go through with your fingers. If you're not wanting to get your hands in there and dirty your own hands, use a pair of rubber gloves. I'm going to use my hands, or you can do it with a couple of forks and tease things apart, but I'm not like that. So just want the meat, not bothered about the sauce. So we'll pull a couple of bits out, and then before I forget, I just need a plate to put the debris on. So, right, where are we? Move the pan out of the way, and then we can have a look at the meat. So, clean hands, obviously, and then as you can see there, that the meat is. Do we need to be a bit lower? Yeah, we need to be a bit lower. I need to move the camera. Let's hope it sticks and not fall off the wall. Get you a bit closer, and then you can see. Is that going to come off? No, that should be okay. Right, so as you can see there, I'll do it with a couple of forks, and then you can get the idea with a couple of forks. If you want to use a couple of forks, it's just a case of teasing the meat away from the fat and any kind of. There's no gristle because it's super tender. So that's all nice meat there. That's nice meat there. That's a nice bit of meat there. That's a nice bit of meat there. All that's just skin. And what you kind of think, what was the purpose of adding that skin? Well, the truth of the matter is, it's added loads and loads and loads of jelly in the form of gelatin and goodness into the beef ragu, and some fat as well, which will have certainly enriched it. A bit of meat. Now, don't waste these. Oh, there's a bit of meat there. Don't waste that. If you've got a dog or a cat, feed that to the dog or the cat, and they will absolutely love you for that. So, as we can see here, there's a bit of meat there. A little bit, and that's a little bit fatty. Is that? We don't want that. But there's a nice bit of meat here. Nice bit of meat there. No, it's not worth getting into there. I'll have that bit there. So, there's a bit of meat there. We'll have that. So that looks fine there. That'll melt into nothing, that's fine. Bit of meat there, that's just a bit of skin, there's a bit of meat there. I mean, you're kind of thinking this is really kind of pointless doing this type of thing, but there's so much flavour in this meat. And so much goodness. And it's so tough, and it's so soft. I mean, it just falls to bits like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the rest of the meat, and then I've not got anything that I want to do with the meat this week. So what I'm going to do is don't think I'm going to freeze it, but I'll mix it in with some of the sauce, and then I'm going to put it in some jars. I'm going to preserve it in some jars, and then I've got some jars of meat ragu in the fridge, in the cupboard or the fridge, depending on how much space I've got, all so I can use it. So probably what I will do, I'll go through all the rest of the meat. I'll stop the video and I'll go through all the rest of the meat, and then I'll kind of show what kind of ratio of sauce to meat that I'm going to put in the jars. There's going to be more sauce left than actually I'm going to use to put it in the jars. So there'll be, but I've got something I can do with that sauce tomorrow. So I'm not going to freeze that sauce. But even just the tomato sauce in there tastes absolutely amazing because it's got all the goodness from the meat. So it's nothing's going to kind of go to waste, and all that sauce has then taken on the flavour of the meat. It's absolutely delicious. But anyway, so yes, all right. So if obviously I use the tomato sauce that I make. If I'd have used vegetables, what I would have done is I'd pick out all the meat from the sauce, and then I'd smash up using like a potato masher or like a blender. I would then blend all those vegetables into the sauce, into the tomato juice which was left, and then that would make the sauce. Obviously, what I did, which is I used my own tomato sauce, so it was kind of like a different way of going around of getting the same kind of product, if that kind of makes sense. You know, like the saying, there's loads of different ways to skin a cat. It's the same kind of thing, but I've just done the whole process in a different kind of way. But anyway, so I'll go through the meat, and then we'll kind of I'll show you how much meat I'm going to mix in with the pasta sauce and what I'm going to put in jars, if you're interested. So I've gone through all the meat. This is all the meat that I've stripped away from the waste. That's the waste. I weighed it. There is about 770 grams of cooked meat, and there's about 390 grams of waste. So not really waste if you're going to feed it to the dog or the cat. Probably the dog will love that. I'm not sure if cats will. But so that's the waste. There's nothing we can do with that. So right, I've taken some of the sauce out of the pan because I didn't want there to be too much sauce when I mix everything in. I can always add a little bit more sauce to the meat. So meat back into the pan. We'll give it a mix around to get the kind of idea of how much sauce. I'll scrape all that off. So just that, just to get all that meat in there, and then we'll give it a mix around, and then we'll have a look at what kind of consistency it is. So I think that'll be about right. Yeah, it's about right. Yeah, well, what we'll do is we'll put that in a couple of jars, and then if we need to top up with that bit of spare sauce that we've got, we can do. So that's all. You see, just see how tender that meat is. That is absolutely delicious. It needs a little bit of seasoning, but we'll adjust that when we're going to put it in something else. Or am I going to do it now? So I'll taste a bit now. See what we add a bit of seasoning to that. Right, so because it's not hot, I'm going to have to use free running salt because otherwise, if I use rock salt, it's not going to melt, so the seasoning won't be evenly distributed throughout the ragu, the meat ragu. So that'll be about enough salt. Give it a stir, and then it'll be completely dispersed all the way through. And then I've got a couple of clean jars and a funnel just to make things easier. So, a couple of clean jars, ladle, and then we'll just push through. It should go, yeah, it's gone through, that's fine. I'll kind of write everything up in the description about what I'm doing. I don't think. Oh no, we might get 3 jars. Let's see if we'll get 3 jars. 3 jars is better than 2. Yeah, we'll get 3 jars. So we'll do 3 jars. Luckily I've got another one clean. So we'll split the meat equally between 3 jars, and then we'll top up with that spare bit of sauce that we've got, which I was going to use tomorrow. There'll still be enough left for tomorrow. I'm going to make something that I've made before, but I was baking bread yesterday, so I'm going to make matzamuro. which is a Sardinian dish, which is layers of fried good quality bread like sourdough, and then layers of tomato, so which is going to be absolutely delicious with this spare bit of sauce that I've got. And I'll bulk it out with some onions and put in a bit of cheese, and it'll be absolutely delicious. But this meat ragu will be in the cupboard, ready for if I just fancy a bit of pasta, or I want to make a meat lasagna or anything like that. So I think that's it. Do we need to carry on filming? I don't know, probably. I just think people can just turn off, can't they, when they get a bit bored? Yeah, so I've made a few videos on preserving. What I normally do is I put things in a cold pan of water, bring it slowly up to the boil, and then simmer it for a good hour, and then that'll heat everything up, kill any nasty bugs that have gotten into the sauce, and then and then let it go cold in the water, and then that'll completely preserve something. I'm blocking the camera, I know I am, but that's that. So that's the majority of sauce out of there. There'll be a little bit left. Push that through there. Oh no, we need that. I don't know why I did that. Rushing as always. Bit of sauce. I could have made the Matsumuro with some of the meat ragu, but I'm not in the mood for one. So there we go. I'll put some lids on, and then we will I'll preserve those, and they'll be ready and waiting. There we go. That's what. So obviously I use the meat from the pig's head, but you don't have to. I would buy, if I wasn't doing it from the pig's meat from the pig's head, I'd use shoulder of pork, and that would do exactly the same thing. Shoulder's better than leg. Leg tends to go quite stringy. There's longer fibres in a pork leg, like longer meat fibres, and I don't think it's just quite as tender and as succulent as the shoulder. So if I'm going to cook something slowly, I always kind of think shoulder's better. There is pork rump, which is the top of the leg, which might be a little bit different, but and I know that's kind of quite popular in Mexican dishes, but I would always recommend shoulder if you're going to slowly cook something down for like ragu. If you want a pork ragu, shoulder's your best bet. So there we go. That's it, I'm sure, for the moment anyway.